My name's Ronnie, and I'm going to teach you some grammar. It's kind of a difficult grammar, but once you learn this overview of auxiliary verbs, English grammar is going to become easier for you, I hope. So, if you're just beginning to learn English grammar, stay in there. You can do it. Yuri, this goes out to you in Salvador, Brazil. Let's keep going, man. We have 3 auxiliary verbs that we use in English: be, do, and have. But the thing about the auxiliary verbs is that each auxiliary verb will tell us what kind of grammar we're going to use with it. So let's look at the first one. Be. So be in its form in the present tense is am, is, are, negative, am not, isn't, and aren't. These are present. The past tense of be, present, or no, the past tense in the positive is was and were, negative, wasn't, and weren't. So how do we actually use this auxiliary verb? And the answer is we use it in 2 forms of English grammar. The first one is progressive. So if you have a progressive sentence, we have present progressive, past progressive, and future progressive. Every time we have a sentence in English with progressive, we know we're going to use the verb to be. So if our sentence is present progressive, we're going to use the present tense of the verb to be, is, am, are, with a verb with ing. So in English grammar, anything that's progressive or continuous is another word for the same grammar. It's always going to be an ing on the verb. The thing that changes and tells us the grammar is the verb to be. Present is, am, are, plus verb ing, but the past, we're going to use the past tense was and were, plus verb ing. So progressive will always have a verb ing. The thing that changes the tense of it is the verb to be. We have future progressive or future continuous. In this one, we're simply going to use the verb will. So in this one, we have will be plus verb ing. For example, I will be eating pizza. This tells us what's going to happen in the future. I was eating pizza was the past, and I am eating pizza, something's happening now. That's present progressive. So the progressive will always have the verb to be, either past, present, or future, and it will always have an ing on the verb. Okay, cool. Let's get more complicated, okay? We have another structure in English grammar called passive. Now, passive voice, basically, you're taking the action from the person, or the focus on the person, and we're putting it towards the activity. So, in a normal English sentence, we would say, I eat lunch. But in a passive sentence, we're taking away the subject and we're focusing on the action. So, with the passive voice, we have future passive, present passive, and past passive. It goes along the same idea, is that the verb to be is going to tell us, is it present or if it's past? When we use a passive sentence, we can only ever use the past participle of the verb, or the third step of the verb. So, passive will always be the verb to be plus the past participle. If it's present, it's is, am, are plus pp, past participle. If it's past, it's was and were plus past participle. It's hard to say the past participle, so I'm going to say pp. I have to go pp. So, as an example, we say lunch is eaten, present tense, lunch was eaten. I'm going to step away and let you check that out. Let your brain absorb it. Make some sentences using this and the verb to be. If we use the future passive, I could say lunch will be eaten. So again, when we're using the future, we use will be, but we're going to use the past participle. Have you made some sentences? Do it now. Come on, make some sentences. Go. Okay. So we've done the verb to be, and hopefully it's beginning to make sense, because English grammar rarely makes sense. I'm going to make it make sense for you. So the next one is the auxiliary verb do. Now this one's interesting because we only use it in the negative form in the simple present, or we use it in the negative in the simple past. So we don't have to worry about the positive, but we do use it for the negative in the simple present and the negative in the past, and for questions. So let's check out first the simple present, or present simple. We only use this auxiliary verb for the negative and the question form. So in the negative, we're going to use subject plus don't or doesn't plus the base verb. Now, this is where English gets tricky, and you have to remember that if it is I, you, we, and they, we use don't. But if it's he, she, or it, we have to use doesn't. So you always have to be careful with your subject and your verb agreement. They have to agree. So as an example, I don't like pizza. If I used he, I would say he doesn't like pizza. And we have to be careful and use the base verb. Okay? The question would be, does he like pizza? Like a dog. If it's a question form, we put the auxiliary verb first. Do, doesn't, subject, plus the base verb. Not the base verb, the base verb. We also use this in the past simple, again, only with negative and only with a question. So the way that we change does, into the negative is didn't in the past. But this is where we always make a mistake. I've told you English grammar is crazy. I'm not joking. When we use didn't, we always have to use the base verb. So this is where we get confused, because we think, Ronnie, this is past tense. So if it's past tense, we have to use the past of the verb. Because our auxiliary verb didn't makes the sentence past. So if it's an auxiliary verb, it's going to tell us if it's past or present, and we have to use the base verb. So we have to say, he didn't go home. You cannot say, he didn't went home. That's grammatically wrong. This verb tells us it's past, and this verb tells us it's present. Oh, that's kind of cool when you learn it. If you're doing the question form, it's very similar to this. Past tense, did, subject, plus your base. Again, you always have to be careful. Even though it is past, we actually have to use the base verb, because the did, or the auxiliary verb, tells us, hey, this is a past tense, not a present tense. Please use the base verb. So, did, didn't. Didn't in the negative and did in the question. Another tip when you are speaking English and you're asking someone a question, always ask them a positive question. It's more difficult for the answer and for the speaker and for everyone involved if you use a negative question. So, just for now, you're just learning this, always ask a positive question. Did I go home? Didn't I go home? The negative question is always much more confusing. And we need to make English grammar simpler. We're almost done here. I'm going to step away and let you absorb this. Please make 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences using the auxiliary verb do. And we are back with the last one. The most exciting one, maybe, ever. Yeah, this is the most exciting one. We are going to use have, has, negative, haven't, and hasn't, and then we have the past, had and hadn't. So, when we use the verb as an auxiliary have, we use it for our perfect tenses in English. They're so perfect. So, when we use the perfect tense, our verb is always going to be the past participle. just like in the passive. So the passive and the perfects in English, we always use the past participle. And again, we can have the future perfect, we can have present perfect, and we can have past perfect. So the way we form the future perfect is we're going to use subject with will. So future, we use will all the time. Have, and then the past participle, okay? Or we can also use has. So the future, we use will plus have plus the past participle, or the PP. If we're using present perfect, we're going to use a subject, have or has, plus the past participle. So if you can think about this, have in the present tense is have and has. So in the past tense, we're going to use had plus the past participle. So if we're using past perfect, we're using had plus PP. If we're talking about present perfect, we're using has plus PP. People get confused, and a lot of people think that the present perfect is the present tense, but it's not. The present perfect talks about the past. The thing that makes the verb present or past is our wonderful auxiliary verb have. If the verb have is present perfect, we use the present tense of the verb. If we use the past tense, if we use past perfect, we're going to use the past tense of have. So, I haven't eaten lunch. I'm hungry. Future, I will have played 7 games. So we're using will, have, plus the past participle. If we use present perfect, we use he, she, it has eaten. You weigh the have eaten. You have to be careful again on your subject and your verb agreement. There's so many things to remember. And then the past participle, the past perfect, all we're doing is changing has or have to had. And this one's cool because we don't have to worry about he, she, and it. They all use had. Thank you for being easy, past perfect. If you have questions about these specific grammar points, if you don't know what these grammar points are, if you want to know more detail about them, you know the website, ingvid.com. You can search in the search area and you can find exactly the grammar points and how we use them. But the thing that I need you to understand is the auxiliary verbs are going to help you understand grammar easier. I hope. If you have questions, throw it to me in the comment box and I can help you. Until next time, I'm out of here.